Is the increase in pop count the primary reason for the decrease in prices on modern basketball cards? Let's take a look at some of the data. Welcome back to the channel. Happy Saturday, everyone. Just finished watching some basketball. Very good game between the Warriors and the Spurs. And again, one of the players that I really like is DeJounte Murray. I mentioned it before, and I actually bought a DeJounte Murray silver, his courtside select silver on StarStock. It's a StarStock A quality card for $75. I actually think that's a pretty good price. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, but I'm pretty high on DeJounte Murray. I just like what I see. I've only watched a few of his games, a few Spurs games. I'm not really a Spurs fan, and I don't really particularly watch the games on the NBA League Pass. I just happened to watch him play when I would watch other teams that I was interested in play against the Spurs, and that's kind of how he caught my attention. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there. That was kind of my big purchase for the night. Nice $75 selected courtside silver DeJounte Murray. So I wanted to get into the pop counts. And is this the reason that there's a downward trend in prices, especially with modern basketball cards? So I wanted to take a look at some of the data, and the data that I'm going to be analyzing comes from the Market Movers tool. Some of you may have heard of Market Movers. They actually track sales, mostly of eBay. I believe they do pull in other data. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it's primarily eBay sales data. So there is sales history on these cards. These are highly traded cards. I picked the 5 most traded cards over the last 90 days. And so we'll take a look and see, is the pop count the primary reason that these cards have declined in value over the last 90 days? And I believe all except for one card actually did go down in value. I wanted to start off with another fun fact like I did in the last video. It was super random that I came across this article about Richard Jefferson, who was a player for the Nets a while back. He actually received a card, an RJ Barrett card, to be autographed. So with these players, they get their cards sent to them by me to autograph for whatever set that they're going to release in that upcoming year. And so I guess Richard Jefferson was going to autograph probably some cards because they throw retired players in there every now and then. So they sent him some cards. Well, they happened to throw in an RJ Barrett card. And as he was autographing the cards, he noticed that it was not him, it was RJ Barrett. And so he said jokingly that he was going to go ahead and autograph the card anyway, and it would probably be worth more money than if RJ Barrett were to autograph it himself. So shots fired. And, you know, to be honest with you, the way RJ Barrett's been playing lately, that might be a true statement. So, okay, well, that's the fun fact for the video. Let's get on to the topic at hand, which is, what is going on with these prices? Why do they keep going down, and when will it ever stop? And obviously none of us know the answer to that, but I wanted to see if we could get to some kind of comfort level as far as cards coming back from PSA, graded in a PSA 10, and when PSA clears through the backlog, is that gonna be the kind of the floor, if you wanna think about it that way? Is that gonna be where we've hit the bottom of the market because we're not seeing an increase in supply the way we have been throughout this year, throughout 2021. So I want to see if that's really a true statement or not. And so what I did is I took a look at the 5 top players, and the first player I looked at is Ja Morant base prism in a PSA 10, and I looked at his sales over the last 90 days. And in the last 90 days, so I'll start with his pop count. His total PSA 10 pop count is 19,006. Which is extremely high. If most of you have been watching other YouTube content creators, probably have heard that the Zion Williamson crossed the 20,000 plateau. So there are 20,000 Zion PSA 10s out there, which is a ton. And so Ja Morant is not too far behind, is at 19,006. Well, over the last 90 days, there were 1,167 new PSA 10s that came back from PSA for this particular Ja Morant card. And in that time, and so they actually, Market Movers tracks that as a percentage of growth. That represented a 6.5% growth in the pop count over the last 90 days. In the meantime, the card has actually declined by roughly 13% over that time. So then the question is, well, is it because these 1,000 new PSA 10s came back? Is that why the card went down in value? And I think to some degree, yes, that if there weren't new PSA 10s coming back from PSA within this time, we may not have seen as drastic of a decline, because Ja Morant's actually been playing very well. And so I would imagine that if the pop count stayed constant, flat in between that time, that we may have even seen an increase in the card. But it's just too hard to tell because, his price decreased more than even the growth in the pop count. That there could be other reasons. And that's one of the things that I wanted to point out is I believe that, I'll just get into it right now. The reason I believe that most of these cards are trending downward has more to do with the market itself and even the greater market. I've been watching some crypto YouTube videos, and they reference the stock market as well. And they're just talking about how markets in general have seen this downward trend. So I think that the baseball card market, the sports card market, is not, exempt from that. I think that they're part of that overall decline for whatever reason. People, when they pull their money out of certain markets, they do it for some financial reason. And it seems like nobody knows, because nobody has a real clear answer as to why that would be. But I think that sports cards fall in that same category. So I believe that that's the real reason we're seeing a decline. I don't believe that it's because sports cards themselves are going away as either as an alternative asset, or that collectors are leaving the hobby because the prices are going down. In fact, I believe a lot of collectors are actually excited about the decrease in prices, because now they can buy cards that they couldn't buy back in February. It's kind of this weird thing that's going on where collectors are actually hoping that the prices continue to go down so they could buy some of the bigger cards that they've been eyeing for a long time. So this is what I've been saying all along. The demand is there. The interest is there. People love the hobby, and even collectors love the hobby, and even investors seem to love the hobby. So I don't think that it's a matter of, oh, sports cards are going to go to zero, which has never happened in the history of sports cards, by the way. So when people say, are you prepared for the market to go to zero? Or what if your collection went to zero? To my knowledge, that has never, ever happened. Their cards have always had some value, even in the 90s, in the late 90s, the early 2000s. Yes, the overwhelming majority of cards probably had little to no value, but the key cards, if you had some of the key rookie cards, if you had a Joe Montana, if you had Hank Aaron or Willie Mays or even Cal Ripken or Tony Gwynn, even though those cards may have gone down in value, they didn't go to zero. You couldn't get everything for free. So just keep that in mind as well. The next card that I looked at is Tyler Herro, and he started out pretty well. So his pop count, 7,237, which is significantly lower than Ja Morant. And over the past 90 days, there have been 1,270 new PSA 10s that have hit the market, and which represents a 21% growth in that pop count. Again, because he has a lower number of PSA 10s overall, so it represents a higher percentage of growth. And in that same time, his card has actually increased in value by 54%. So even though 1,200 new PSA 10s came back from PSA, and who knows how many of those actually hit the market, but I'm assuming a decent amount of them probably did. Even though all that happened, his card still increased by 54%, and that's clearly a result of his play on the court. Also, his prices were dramatically lower from the prior year. There was a lot of hype going into last season, and he didn't do very well, so his cards were very low to start the season. So you'll tend to see that when players have bounce-back seasons, you're going to see this spike in their prices. And I think people seem to think that maybe that doesn't go on anymore, because that's really where flipping starts, right? I mean, you kind of bet on a player going into the season, and if you bought into Tyler Herro going into this season, you probably could have made some money. As you see, he's gone up by 54% over the last 90 days. The next card I looked at was RJ Barrett, 9,576 total PSA 10 pop count, 1,306 new PSA 10 cards that came back. And you could see it seems like it's roughly the same amount for every player, about 1,000 cards that have come back in the last 90 days. That's a 16% growth in his overall PSA 10 pop count. Meanwhile, the card itself has gone down 46%. So it's lost almost half of its value in the last 90 days. And I believe that that's largely a result of his play on the court. He really hasn't played very well. He doesn't really seem to be a factor in the Knicks offense. And to be honest with you, I've watched the last few Knicks games. I really haven't seen him on the court very much at all. So I'm not sure what's going on with RJ Barrett, but when younger players tend to disappear like that, their cards tend to go down in value very quickly. And I think that's what we're seeing here. But I don't think that that's necessarily I think a small part of it is the increase in pop count, but I think a bigger part of it is his play on the court, along with the general downward trend of the market. The next couple of cards I looked at are some bigger names, some key names here. Trae Young, who also has a large pop count, 10,744 PSA 10s. 517 new PSA 10s hit the market in the last 90 days. That's a 5% growth in the pop count, but his card has gone down 37% over that last 90 days. And I think that part of the reason Trae Young has actually been playing very well, but the Hawks have kind of started off hot and cold. I would say mostly cold. And I think the expectation was, since they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, that they would actually start out hot again. So that was the hope, and it didn't happen. And so I think Trae Young's cards are going to be the cards that feel the effect of the slow start. But again, I think there's just a general downward trend in the market, and I don't think that it has to do, at least in large part, to the number of cards coming back from PSA. And this is to my point. The last card I looked at here is the famous Zion Williamson 20,000 pop count card that people have been talking about, that there's so many PSA 10s, 20,000. And I'll tell you, in the last 90 days, for a player who has had, a player's card who has had so many PSA 10 cards graded since 2019, there were a whopping 836 new PSA 10 cards that came back in the last 90 days. So I expected that number to be a lot higher. When I heard his pop count was 20,000, I was like, oh man, there must have been thousands and thousands upon cards coming back in the last 90 days. There have only been 836. So that's why when I saw that, I'm like, well, then that couldn't be the main reason for the decrease in his card price. And I think when people say, well, we don't know the supply, we don't know how many are coming back from PSA, so we need to hold off and wait until we have that information, until we decide this player at the floor. Should we invest in this player? Do we think they're going to have a bounce back year, or are they going to bounce back when they come back from injury? And I just feel like when we look at the pop counts, that was a 4.3% growth in the total pop count, yet Zion has had a 35% decrease in his overall value. And for obvious reasons, he hasn't been on the court. People have a lot of negative talk about Zion, his weight, and he's just out of shape and he's injury prone. And so there's not a lot of faith in Zion in the future as far as, you know, is he going to be a star in this league? And I definitely think that's a little overblown. I think that at any point in time, he's a professional athlete, so he can get himself into shape if he chooses, probably very quickly. I'm sure he just wants to get healthy first. And when you've seen him on the court, he is as dominant as anyone in the NBA. So I think if the prices continue to trend downward, I definitely see Zion Williamson as a buy, even with these high pop counts. Because like I said, I'm not worried about the pop count going much higher than 20,000. I don't anticipate a 25,000 card pop count or a 30,000 pop count. If only 836 have come back in the last 90 days, and PSA is supposedly grading between 30 and 40,000 cards per day, I would have thought that pop count would be a lot higher over the last night. It just wasn't. And there were a couple of YouTube content creators who did point this out, that they were saying that a lot of the cards that are coming back from PSA are Pokemon, are just other sports, other types of cards. They're not necessarily the cards that we're talking about on these YouTube channels, particularly Zion or Trae or any of the ultra modern basketball. So I personally feel like the pop counts, they're gonna grow, but they're not gonna grow exponentially. I feel like we can kind of get a handle on what the supply is and decide, is now a good time to buy Trae Young. I also think there's a real hatred toward base cards, and I think that's something that can be capitalized on right now. as people start to dump their base and look for serial numbered auto patches and everything else, which that stuff's going to run out, because the reason that stuff's so popular is it's limited. Once thousands upon thousands of new collectors join the hobby, what's going to be left are these base cards. And in a PSA 10, those are going to be desired cards. Those are going to be cards that collectors are going to want. They want the gem mint rookie card of whatever player they want to invest in. So that's kind of how I see it. I think it's actually a good time to buy base cards because there's a lot of hatred towards base. There's this idea that thousands upon thousands of PSA 10s are coming back and gonna come back maybe over the next 6 months. I just don't see it based on this data that I'm looking at. I could be way off. I know that there's still millions of cards to be graded, so we'll see how that plays out. But over the last 90 days, even if we look over the next 90 days, and if I believe we'll get even fewer PSA 10s from all of these cards that I just mentioned over the next 90 days, and then even following that, even fewer than that. I think we've climbed the mountain and we're on the downward trend. But there are probably people who have a little bit more insight than I do. The person that does the gem mint data, the Retro Hoops collectible guy that looks at the PSA data every week. I definitely didn't look at it that closely, so I would love to hear some feedback from people who watch this and kind of have a little bit more knowledge than I do. I appreciate everything, all the feedback that I've gotten over the last PSA video. And I really appreciate everyone watching and commenting and interacting. This has been by far the most fun I've ever had in the hobby. So I really enjoy it. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you on the next one.